stream. So less than a minute. Less than. It still said, you know, I was on the hour when I hit stream, so we're good. Anyway, I've got a little bit of a, well, you'll see why. I feel a little bit of pain in my forehead from researching this topic. Well, let's just dive right in. Let's dive right in. Why not? Shall we? So a lot of you guys, you know, you may be familiar with images like the one on the screen now. This is a image of migrants, invaders, really, coming to America via train. In fact, in Mexico, they call it riding the beast. Riding the beast. And yeah, this is something that's been going on for many, many years. They sneak on the trains, and the trains just go through the border. They don't stop at Border Patrol, so it's a good way to get in. And it's estimated that migrants from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and obviously Mexico, numbers as high as 500,000 a year ride on trains to get into the United States. There have been some decreases lately. I guess in 2023, one of the train lines, in fact, shut down service for, I think, like a month or so they could try to crack down on it. And, but yeah, it continues. I mean, again, they're tightening up the border now. But this was just like last year, you still had this sort of thing going on. This is a report from a year ago.
Hundreds of migrants arrived in Juarez today by train.
Asylum. Thank you for choosing KTSM 9 News at 10. I'm Andy Morgan. Monica is off. KTSM 9 News reporter Jesus Baltazar is live from the U.S.-Mexico border. And Jesus, what is the scene out there right now?
Yes, Andy, I'm specifically here by the border wall on the Yarborough exit. Over the past hour, it seemed quite calm, although you can see several U.S. Border Patrol units beside me. I have seen DPS vehicles, as you can see right now, that have been crossing across the river. There have been 2 drones above me just monitoring, but I have only seen 1 migrant family brought across the border so far. Now, this video that you'll see on screen will show migrants riding a top cargo train that arrived in Ciudad Juarez this afternoon. Some migrants telling our correspondents...
They're living on the train. They're like living on the top of the train. Okay? And look at this. Let's back that up. So, yeah, this kind of numbers we're talking about. This is not something new. As with all of our immigration problems, this is not something new. It's not like trains were invented last week. And, we don't know how to handle this. And not only that, there have been several incidents, one of which we're going to go over tonight, that was extremely high profile, that should have lit a fire under their ass, and by they I mean the federal government's ass, over 25, 50 really years ago. And the case that we're going to discuss tonight is this man right here. He goes by lots of different names. The name we're going to use tonight is Resendiz. That's one of his aliases. That's the one that I guess is generally accepted by law enforcement these days. So that's what we're going to use. He was born August 1st, 1961 in Pueblo, Mexico. And he lived there till he was about 12 or 13. And that's when he decided, or discovered really, that he could sneak into the United States by riding on trains, by sneaking onto a train hobo style and crossing the border. In fact, he first crossed the border at age 13 back in 1973. He remained illegally in the country until he was first recorded deported at age 16 in 1976 in Brownsville, Texas. He was arrested, and then 2 months later, he was released back into Mexico. This is going to get frustrating for everybody. When you have people invading your country, and all that happens is you give them a free ride back to their support system, don't be surprised if that doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it didn't solve the problem with Medarino here. He returned to the U.S. A month later and was busted in Michigan. Michigan! You know, Michigan, the other side of the country. In Sterling Heights, Michigan, where he was deported again. A month later, in that same year, in October, he was picked up again in McAllen, Texas. In September of 1979, so just like a couple years later, he's busted again in Miami. This time, he's given a 20-year jail sentence for burglary, aggravated battery, and grand theft auto. But he only serves 5 years of the 20-year sentence, and then he's deported again. By 1986, he was back in the country. So this is like basically immediately. In fact, by 1985, he was back in the country. But in 1986, this is when things get real, I guess. maybe before then, but this is the first time we have evidence of it. In 1986, he was staying at a homeless shelter, and he met a woman that today is only known as Norma, who was homeless, lived at the homeless shelter with him. He took her out to a secluded area and then shot her 4 times in the back of the head with a .38, and likely, although we don't know because just based on some of the other things that are going to happen, you're going to find out about, likely sexually assaulted the corpse, but her body wasn't found until it was badly decomposed when he dumped it near a farmhouse in Texas, around San Antonio. He then went back to the homeless shelter where her boyfriend lived and took him out to a creek. So said, oh, I'm going to show you where your girlfriend is, and murdered him, threw him in a creek. To this day, we don't know this man's name, and his body has never been recovered because this was back in 1986. Authorities are unaware of these crimes, but he's arrested anyway in Texas, this time for falsely claiming citizenship. This is the same year that the body of Norma was discovered. He is once again deported. By 1988, he's back in the United States. He registers with a temp agency in St. Louis, where he votes in 2 elections. Also in 1988, he's arrested again in New Orleans, given a sentence of 18 months, but paroled after 1 year, where the authorities once again lose track of him. But not for long, because he's busted again in St. Louis shortly after for attempting to defraud Social Security, and then given another 30 months. He then is released early again, and on July 19th, 1991, in San Antonio, Texas, he bludgeons a 22-year-old man by the name of Michael White to death with a brick. His body is found in the front yard of an abandoned downtown house, where the murder remained unsolved for a while. In 1992, so just the next year, he's arrested in New Mexico, this time for burglary. He's given a 2-year sentence, but they let him out after a year, and he disappears again. A year after that, 1995, in California, he's arrested again for trespassing in a train yard with an illegal gun, and they just deport him. By the way, the reason he's all over the place, he's in Miami, he's in Michigan, he's in New Mexico, he's in California, he's in San Antonio, is, for lack of a better term, he's basically a hobo. He rides the rails. That's how he gets around all over the country. And as he goes around the country, he commits crimes and then escapes on rail to another random part of the country and commits more crimes, because why wouldn't he? Every time he's arrested, he's let out early, and then he just walks right back into the country with no consequence, over and over and over again. In fact, by August 1996, he had been arrested 12 times and deported at least 7 of those times. We are not a serious country. We are not a serious country. Trump just now tackling this problem isn't something to be excited about so much as it's like, it's like getting excited because you have a roommate that stopped shitting on the kitchen floor. High five! Oh, Billy stopped shitting on the kitchen floor. Wow, let's bake him a cake. Now, by March 23rd, 1997, these 2 teenagers, Jesse Howell, 19 on the left, and the 16-year-old girl on the right, Wendy von Huben, were hanging out apparently too close to a rail yard, and, they had an encounter with Moderino Resendiz, and he murdered them both by bludgeoning them to death with a metal pipe that he found nearby. This is 1997. By July, that was in Miami, I believe, or in Florida. By July, he was all the way in California again, where he bludgeoned a homeless person to death at another train yard in Colton, California. Then, by October 4th, same year. We're not into 1998 yet. 1997, the next month after he killed the homeless guy in California, Christopher Mayer, this 21-year-old, was with his girlfriend Holly Dunn. They were at a college town, Lexington, Kentucky. They were at a college party. It was getting a little out of hand, and Holly wasn't having very much fun. This is Holly. They decided to leave the party and go for a walk. They walked along the train tracks that were nearby where the party was, and they were met by, yet again, Moderino Resendiz, who had some sort of knife. He threatened them with a knife, told them to sit down on the ground, or he was going to kill them. They both sat down. This is when Resendiz took off the backpack of Christopher was wearing, and he removed the straps. He cut the straps off of the backpack. He removed her belt, Holly's belt, and he then tied them up separately and told them if they were to move, that he would kill them both. He then walked off. Holly Dunn and Christopher tried to undo their tied legs and hands. Christopher wasn't able to untie his hands or his legs, but Holly was able to get her legs somewhat untied. And Christopher told her that, you know what, you got to go. You got to run away because this isn't looking good. And before she could leave, Resendiz showed up with a small boulder, but a large rock. And without warning, smashed Christopher over the head with it, killing him. Basically crushed his head like a... He then looked over at Holly and said, well, you don't have to worry about him anymore. And he got his knife out, held it against her throat, shoved her on the ground, and proceeded to rape her. After he raped her while bludgeoning her with the handle of the knife, he went and found a 2x4 that was nearby and smacked her in the head until he thought that she was dead. This is a photo of her after the attack. Fractured her skull, knocked her out unconscious. Her breathing became so shallow that he thought he had killed her, and then he left. When she finally came to, she thought that, she was in a daze. She knew that, Christopher was dead because his head was crushed. She was covered in blood. She didn't know what kind of injury she had. And so she stumbled towards the closest light that she could find, which was the home of another college student, this guy here, who freaked out because she just stumbled into his house looking, almost dead. He immediately called the authorities, and they got her to the hospital, and luckily, she was able to survive. And not only was she able to survive, she was able to give a description of Resendiz. And this is the sketch that they came up with at the time. She also mentioned that he had a Mexican accent and gave a fairly accurate description. Just 1 month later, 1 month and a year later, October 4th, 1998, in Hughes Springs, Texas, he broke into the house of 87-year-old Leafy Mason. He beat her to death with an antique iron, like the kind you would iron your clothes with, like those big metal irons that you would leave next to a fire or something to heat them up, if you've seen them like in antique shops or something. It's just a big, heavy piece of iron with a handle on it. He caved her head in and raped her corpse. And then just a few days later, in Georgia, he broke into the home of Fanny Byers, who was 81 years old, and bludgeoned her to death in her home as well, and sexually assaulted her as well. In 1998, and this is just in 1998, the year that both those crimes took place, he was apprehended by Border Patrol over 7 times. In 1998, he was in custody and released back into Mexico. But he wasn't done in 1998. December 17th, 1998, he went to the home of Claudia Benton. She was a 39-year-old doctor. He snuck in while she was still asleep. She was a wife and mother of twin girls. And on her mantle was a large bronze statuette, about a foot in length. He took the statuette from her mantle, snuck into her bedroom, and smashed her with it repeatedly. And that wasn't enough. Even though she got 19 skull fractures, and in trying to fight back, she dislocated her elbow, had lots of defensive wounds. So he went down to the kitchen, got one of her knives, and then stabbed her several times. At least 3 of those wounds were considered fatal stab wounds. He then ransacked the house, collect jewelry, stole a guitar, and a couple other items. He cooked himself some food, had a meal, and then went into the garage and broke the steering column off of her Jeep so that he could hotwire the Jeep, and drove away. When one of her coworkers was worried that she hadn't shown up to work, they called the cops. She wasn't answering her phone. They showed up. They noticed the garage door was open, and they, rapidly found her body. They said blood was all over the place. The crime scene was the most horrific that any of the responding officers had ever seen. They found the broken steering column and were able to lift some fingerprints from it, however. The fingerprints, when they ran it through their system, matched with a bunch of different aliases that he had been using in and around Texas. And so they finally thought they had a I mean, they had several pictures of him. He'd been arrested so many times. they had several pictures of him. So they now had a face, but they hadn't connected. This was the first crime where they actually had a name that they could put to it. And they hadn't connected it to any of the other murders that he had committed yet, or any of the other crimes, which is infuriating because it's just like, this guy's walking into the country. He's murdering people, beating them to death, getting arrested, let go, coming back into the country. And this kind of also shows you how ridiculous it is to even think that we can vet these people. Like, oh, we need to vet these people. Really? How are you going to do that if they just give you some fucking made up name? Which is exactly what they do. This guy had so many fucking aliases. Like, this is a real shot of some of his aliases. But anyway, they recovered the stolen Jeep in San Antonio, and the Jeep had his fingerprints and DNA all over it. And also, the fucked up thing about all of these murders, especially with how the violence, he was raping basically not just, look, a dead body's bad, but just raping a body that's beat all to shit is just like, he's an animal. He's not even a human. He's literally just a fucking demon. He's literally a fucking demon. Because they collected DNA evidence off of her body that showed that after he caved her head in with a statue and stabbed her several times, and she was basically, like hamburger meat, he raped the body. Then, just a few months later, May 2nd, 1999. And yes, that says Weimar. And yes, actually it gets weirder than just that. There's a small town in Texas, population, I think it was less than 2,000 at the time of this next fun bit. Small town America called Weimar, Texas. There was a small town church next to the train tracks. Norman and Karen Siernik were the couple that ran the church, and they lived in a house just behind the church near the tracks. When they failed to show up for Sunday service, the parishioners at first were like, well, it's his birthday. It's his birthday, so, they're probably taking their time. It's not a big deal. He's just a little bit late. They'll be here. But after a while, they finally sent someone from the church to go check on him. When he arrived at their home, he found the inside of their home ransacked, and the couple both beaten to death with a sledgehammer in their bed. They called the police. The police responded. It was the first homicide Weimar had in over 70 years. What he had done is he had ridden on in the town on a train. In the middle of the night, he snuck into their garage, because it was the kind of town where people don't lock their doors. He found a sledgehammer. He then snuck into their bedroom. He hit Norman in the head first, caving his skull in. This woke up Karen. He then swung the sledgehammer like a baseball bat, caving her head in. He then went back to Norman, who was at this point probably either dead or dying, and viciously, repeatedly smashed his body with the sledgehammer, and then went back to Karen's body, viciously and repeatedly smashed her body with that sledgehammer, and then the body. He then walked downstairs and made himself something to eat, and he stole their truck and drove away in the night. This is a part of an article I found where it says, Resendiz Karen Siernik after obliterating her face with the tool. And you do not want to see those photos. At this point, the FBI got involved. Finally, this guy had been murdering his way across America for, over a decade. Had been deported almost 20 times and arrested a bunch of times, and they just couldn't find him for some reason. Even though the DOJ would later admit that in December of 1998, right around the time he was murdering Claudia Benton, he was reported to INS by the West University Place Police Department, and INS never picked him up. But they had him in custody for being in the country illegally until they were forced to let him go. Well, not forced to, but that's how things have gone in this country for your entire life. They don't give a fuck that this kind of shit's happening. They don't. Because they have the DNA evidence at this crime scene and some of these others now, they're finally able to link some of these cases together. They realize it's him because of the DNA collected at the scene of Claudia Benton's murder and the scene from the crime in Lexington, Kentucky with Christopher Mayer and his girlfriend Holly. And the sketch that Holly had provided or given the description for kind of sealed the deal that this was the guy they were looking for, because the other factor was that all these crimes had taken place very near a railroad. And now they were starting to put together that, that's how this guy is getting all around the country, as he's riding on trains And that's why there's no vehicles found. That's why there's no tire tracks ever found. And that's why he's able to steal the vehicle of the victim and leave without someone having dropped him off or something like that. So now the FBI is hot on his tail, and they're looking for him. You think they're gonna find him yet? Well, this murder, his latest murder, took place May 2nd, 1999 in Weimar, Texas. The FBI has his name. The FBI has his photo. The FBI knows that he rides on trains. The FBI is going out with dogs and searching for trains on June 2nd. So a month after he murdered the couple in Texas, Border Patrol apprehends him and deports him back to Mexico. So they had him. They've had him a bunch of times. They have his photo. They have his name. They know exactly that they know he's Mexican. They know that that's how he's getting to the country. They know he's been deported like 20 times. They know everything about this guy, or at least they should. Border Patrol picks him up while they're looking for him, and they send him back to Mexico. But don't worry, because guess what? 2 days later, 2 days after Border Patrol deports him back to Mexico on June 2nd, on June 4th, he's back in Texas, Houston, Texas. He breaks into the home of Naomi Dominguez, a school teacher at the Houston Independent School District of Benjamin Franklin Elementary School, and he kills her with a pickaxe, nearly decapitates her, again, the body, and then he steals her car, same day, it's the same night, steals her car, it's a white Honda Civic, drives about 100 miles back to Weimar, to this home, the home of Josephine Konvicka, 73-year-old woman. He breaks into her home, still with the pickaxe that he used to kill Naomi just hours previously, kills her with a pickaxe, leaves the pickaxe in her head, hits the body, and then again goes and makes himself a meal, steals her car, tries to steal her car, but couldn't get it going for some reason, and then disappears into the night. The FBI is looking everywhere for him. It's starting to hit the media at this point. The media is calling him the railway killer, or the railroad killer. There's newspaper articles all over the place, news reports on television. People are terrified. All these small towns that hadn't had a homicide in near a century, where people didn't lock their doors, white small towns, high trust, they're all locking their doors. They're all telling their kids they can't be outside anymore. It's dangerous out there now. You've got a psycho Mexican on the loose going around killing people and then raping their bodies. Well, again, because he's good at jumping on trains, he's able to evade police yet again. And 11 days later, he goes from Weimar, Texas, to a small town in Illinois called Gorham. He gets off of the train, walks to a small farmhouse that's almost, it's only like 100 feet from the tracks. Inside the house is George Morber. He's 80 years old. He surprises George, overpowers him, ties him to his recliner with telephone cord, then takes his shotgun, George Morber's shotgun, walks behind him, and shoots him with a 12 gauge in the back of the head. He then begins to read the newspaper and eat some of George's food. When he's surprised by George's daughter, Carolyn, that's her on the right, Carolyn Frederick, she was 52, she walks in, and Resendiz gets the shotgun and beats her to death with the shotgun. He beats her with it so much, he actually breaks the shotgun into pieces, and then, of course, he her body. He then goes around the house, taking down their family photos, gets their driver's licenses out of their pockets, and puts them on the table while he snacks on some food and looks at their photos and reads the newspaper. He then walks out and steals Morber's red pickup truck, where it is found about 60 miles south near some train tracks. He left enough fingerprints at the scene to where, on DNA, to where they were able to connect him to this murder, even though it was much, much further away. And just like the towns in Texas, people were having to lock their doors, tell their kids not to go outside anymore. In fact, this is a quote from the Houston Chronicle from around that time. Quote, "Locals soon locked their doors and kept their children within sight, things they had never felt compelled to do before. Sargent says her aunt stopped walking the tracks for exercise because nobody trusted anyone. Gorham residents turned less charitable to transients. Resident Willa Homan said, after this hobo turned out to be the railroad killer, that changed things. You've got people locking up their doors." So that high-trust society was obliterated by an invader who was just running amok throughout the country, murdering people in their homes. Finally, at this point, it's June, this is a few days later, June 21st, 1999, the FBI adds him to the top 10 most wanted. The top 10 most wanted. They're really gonna find him now, right? They're really going to find him. They start going through trains, arresting illegals who are riding the trains to get into the country. Oh, they're enforcing the border now? Trying to find this guy? Oh, crazy. The whole country's on edge because, there's railroad tracks all throughout the country. And if he's killing people, it's not just on the border. He's not just killing people in Texas. He's going all the way up into Illinois. And, if, they'll later find out about some of these other cases. At this point, though, they don't know about all the, the case in Florida, and they haven't connected the case in California and lots of other cases. The FBI looks like a bunch of fucking idiots because of the fact that they had him in custody, the fact that they've arrested him so many times, the fact that they have deported him so many times. They try to make a hero. If you go back and look at documentaries, of which there are many of this case, they try to make a big deal out of it about this Don Clark guy, the black FBI guy. Make it sound like, oh, he did the best job that he could. It was just technology wasn't good enough. That's why he kept getting released back into Mexico. It was a technology problem. Meanwhile, the authorities, what are they going to do? All they're telling people is, watch out for this psycho, because we don't have him. Well, amplified audio, that'd be good.
If I lived near a railroad track, I'd certainly have it well lit. I'd check and make sure nothing is out of the ordinary. I'd know my environment, my neighbors. I'd check my doors and windows.
Yep, you're on your own, guys. You're on your own. A few days later, after he's been put on the FBI's most wanted list, and it's starting to go, more into national news, they start to, the reporters do some digging and start to see that they've had him in custody all these times and start to ask questions.
Reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Under the heading of hard to believe but true. And how did this happen? Federal agents revealed today they had the accused so-called railroad serial killer in their hands just weeks ago. But somehow he slipped through the bureaucracy, allegedly to kill again and to become the object of an even more intensive, frustrating manhunt. CBS's Bob McNamara in Texas is covering the story of the one who got away.
This photograph of Rafael Resendiz-Ramirez was taken June 2nd, less than a month ago, when El Paso Border Patrol agents caught the accused serial killer trying to slip into this country. The slip-up has angered the FBI.
I'm not going to discuss whether it was a mechanical error or whether it was an error at all. You'll have to get that from immigration.
The Border Patrol says Resendiz-Ramirez was one of dozens rounded up that day. Illegal aliens whose names and fingerprints routinely go into a federal computer network. But the system didn't identify him as a fugitive, and he was returned to Mexico and let go. 2 days and 400 miles later, near Weimar, Texas, 73-year-old Josephine Convica was found murdered in her home near a railroad. A day later in Houston, 26-year-old Noemi Dominguez, a school teacher, was found beaten to death in her home near the tracks. And 10 days after that, 800 miles north in southern Illinois, an 80-year-old man and his daughter were murdered. Resendiz-Ramirez fingerprints found at the scene.
All I can assure the public is that we're going to work very hard to try to capture this person and get him off the street so that no one else can get hurt.
The FBI says calls with reported sightings of Resendiz-Ramirez number more than 2,000 now. But a week after he was last seen in Kentucky, agents say the drifter who rides the rails on a killing spree could be anywhere tonight. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Dallas.
Oh, good. He could be anywhere.
An alert in central Nebraska today after a report that Rafael Resendiz-Ramirez, also known as the Railroad Killer, may have been spotted in the town of Cozad. But a search of the town turned up nothing. The alert followed an embarrassing admission that Ramirez had been arrested earlier this month by the INS. Stephanie Lambadakis reports.
Today, the FBI is scrambling to explain how Rafael Resendiz-Ramirez, the alleged railroad killer now suspected of 8 murders in 3 states, was arrested, photographed, and fingerprinted, then sent back to Mexico like a routine illegal alien.
Everybody has been very responsive, and as a result, this photo...
Good old Don Clark. Now, here's the thing. As much as this was kind of a scandal while it was happening, I watched 5 different documentaries on this case, and not a single one of them even mentioned this part of the story. In fact, quite the opposite. In every one of the documentaries, they made the FBI sound like superheroes that used all this crazy technology and all these techniques to get his fingerprints and DNA and catch the killer. Like it was like watching an episode of 24 or something. They never mention this is a big part of the case. Yeah, and it doesn't even get like a small mention. Why? Because they're rewriting history. They're rewriting history so they don't have to mention the failures of the federal government, the possible diversity hire issues related to Don Clark. I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know that any of this stuff had to do with his incompetence. It's not a good look, though. And the buck stops here. If that's the guy in the head of the investigation, and he's not communicating to all the... Doesn't matter if there's our computers weren't tied together yet. Well, then you use a fucking phone. You use a fucking phone. You call it Border Patrol and say, wait, we're looking for this fucking guy. This is what he looks like. But they don't... This part never gets mentioned. They just act like, oh, this black super cop, hot on the trail with DNA and fingerprints.
photograph has come up. Clearly, we would have liked to have had it before, but it's come up now, and we want to deal with the information that we have in front of us.
INS computers did not show anything about his criminal record, which dates back almost 20 years. Nor did computers indicate that Resendiz-Ramirez had been permanently deported in 1981, information that may have kept him in custody.
Well, the agents on the scene.
And here's the other thing, too, is once again, it's like, oh, we need more technology. It's not that we need to enforce our border better. It's not that you know what, maybe we should just shoot these people when they start coming across the border. Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to set an example. Maybe we need to make it not so attractive for these people to come across the border. Maybe we need to start punishing people who hire illegal immigrants because, by the way, Resendiz wasn't just going around murdering his way through life, like, well, yeah, he was, but he was also working places. He was working as a migrant worker on farms, working as a mechanic. There were lots of people hiring him. That discussion never comes into play. Instead, they frame it as, oh, well, we need to spend more money to have more of a police state, more of a surveillance state. If we're going to solve this, we need to keep an eye on all the goyim. We need to have all these computers all linked together, keeping an eye on you because of this guy, which is what they did. And look, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have, I think we should have extreme tracking when it comes to people attempting to cross over into America in the same way you'd want to have lots of intel on a terrorist. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're all fucking terrorists. They're all fucking invaders. And I gives a fuck why they're coming over here. We have never been serious about securing our border. To be honest, I don't know that we're being serious now. I know there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, you know, look, the military, they went down there. Ooh, well, again, optically, looks good. Oh, look, they deported this Haitian guy that likes Obama. He was yelling in the back of an SUV that he liked Obama. Well, that's great. So one Haitian guy. Oh, but Tom Homan says they're getting rid of hundreds. Okay, again, just on trains per year, it's like 500,000 people coming into the country. Okay? Even if you're deporting thousands a day, maybe even tens of thousands, which is logistically impossible because you've just kind of like let it go for so long, you're not making a fucking dent. And so they're going to throw money at the problem, like they did in this case. Oh, well, we're giant fuck-ups and we didn't do the thing right? Oh, we need more money, more computer systems. We need more drones, more AI stuff. When it's like, is that really what deters people from coming into the country? Is it? Is that what stops someone from wanting to illegally enter the United States? Oh, they might have drones and databases. Or is it snipers? Snipers and towers. I feel like that would probably be a bigger deterrent. Maybe if you put the kinds of drones in the air that you see the footage of in Ukraine, I could get behind that. If we're going to have that kind of drone footage put on the air, instead of watching some, poor Russian or poor Ukrainian soldier get his head blown off by a stick of dynamite tied to a fucking drone with a GoPro on it, why don't we shove that stuff up Pablo's ass when he's coming across the border? Pretty sure things would stop really quick. But we're not serious about our border. We're not a serious country. So instead, they're going to say, oh, we need more software.
When they made the original stop on June 1st and June 2nd, had no idea he was wanted for anything. The Border Patrol stopped, last year, 1.5 million people crossing the border illegally.
The main reason
This isn't like a new problem. This is 1999. This is 26 fucking years ago. And they're like, oh, they stopped that. Okay, well, if you stopped 500,000 people, how many people did you not stop? This stupid number that people act like it has been real for 40 years. Oh, it's always 11 million. There's always 11 million immigrants, illegal immigrants in the country. Even though they're crossing the border in the millions every year, and every time they get deported, this guy, shows how easy it is to come right back over and over and over and over again. And look, in that number that he's talking about, Border Patrol deported 500,000 illegals coming across the border. Well, yeah, 3 of them were this guy, because they counted each time, I'm sure, and he just keeps coming fucking back.
he slipped by is because FBI and INS computers don't talk to each other. Because of the sheer volume of border crossings, the INS only runs quick fingerprint checks, but does not run more comprehensive ones through the FBI's massive criminal databases, where the information on Resendiz-Ramirez is kept. The INS insists they can't make those inquiries every time, or border processing would come to a halt.
Well, then maybe it should come to a halt. See, that never enters into their heads, because they don't care. This is a minor bump in the road. So one of the millions of people we're letting into the country, it turned out to be a serial killer. Maybe one of the most prolific serial killers in the country. Oh, I thought that was white people. I thought that was white males that were serial killers. Isn't that what they always say? It's always a white male when it's a really? Is it? Funny how you've never heard of this guy. If only they'd had more computers.
Even if it only took 2 hours per person, that's 3 million hours right there, which takes our Border Patrol agents off of the line, more time in the station processing.
Okay, I guess that means they're going to have to start opening fire on them. What you're doing isn't working. It has never worked. These people, they only respect strength. It reminds me of how surprised everyone was when we go and every time it happens, when the United States goes and topples a government, like an authoritarian government in a third world country. And then they're like, okay, now you've got democracy, the magic ingredient that fixes everything and every people, because we're all the same. And then immediately it becomes corrupt, and they often elect people that are considered terrorists by the United States. You can't treat foreigners the same way you treat white people.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
The FBI is receiving hundreds of tips about the suspected railroad killer wanted for 8 murders. Several sightings were reported in St. Louis. Police searched passing railroad cars last night but did not find the suspect. Meanwhile, an uncle in Mexico says the suspect's real name is Angel Resendiz-Ramirez. Still to come on tonight.
So his name keeps changing. They finally find out he has a wife. The way they find out he has a wife, this is the crack FBI for you. They find out he has a wife because they see it on Mexican television. She gets interviewed on Mexican television, and she talks about how he was always sending her gifts and jewelry and shit. So the Texas Rangers go down and interview the wife, find out that he's been basically sending her belongings of his victims. He's been stealing jewelry, I guess in between murdering them, raping their corpse, and then having a meal in their kitchen. He's also stealing their jewelry and then sending it back home. You also have the Mexican government not wanting to cooperate, because the Mexican government, here's a big difference, here's another giant difference between white people and non-white people. It's also a good example as to why the death penalty is less popular these days. I wonder why that tracks exactly with immigration. You see, in Mexico, a lot of people don't know this. If someone's going to get the death penalty, or they're in jeopardy of getting the death penalty, Mexico won't extradite them back to the United States, because Mexico doesn't believe in the death penalty. You know, ultra-violent, crime-ridden, cut people's faces off Mexico, they don't believe in the death penalty. I guess we're just these barbarians that believe in the death penalty. White people don't realize the eugenic effect the death penalty has had on white people for generations. And all you have to do is look at Mexico and think to yourself, I bet if they just started killing motherfuckers, taking them out of the gene pool, probably it might help out. But Mexico starts saying that they don't want to help. They also say that they don't have the manpower to look for him in Juarez because of all the crime that's already in Mexico, all of the gang crime and the drug cartels. So they're basically not even looking for him, even though in retrospect, after they finally get him, which we'll get to here in a second, they realize, I bet a lot of these dead bodies that we're finding next to the railroad tracks, mostly of women, we thought those were just, this is such a murderous hellhole, Mexico, we just assumed that was normal. But now that you think about it, maybe it's this Resendiz guy. But anyway, you have this article from CNN, 1999, talking about how the wife and the mother in Juarez aren't being super helpful. Here's a quote from that article. The fugitive's mother, Virginia Resendiz, lives in Juarez, a neighborhood called Patria. Unlike the massive manhunt for Resendiz-Ramirez in the United States, there are no wanted posters for him in sight in Juarez or the state of Chihuahua, where the police say they have assigned only 2 agents to the case. There is a warrant out for his arrest, and if he's captured, he'll be handed over to Interpol, which has the records for his extradition, said Alejandro Estudillo of the Chihuahua Attorney General's office. Some Juarez residents say that allegations against Resendiz-Ramirez pale in comparison with the dozens of local murders that have gone unsolved for 6 years. While many of the murders took place less than a mile from the home of Resendiz-Ramirez's mother's house, local police say there's no evidence to link him to any of those cases, and he has no criminal record in the town. So there's your crack detective work going on in Mexico, where they just don't seem to give a flying fuck about, serial killers, because it's just like this big murder fest going on down there. In fact, eventually what ends up happening is they jack up the reward to north of $100,000. Which is a lot of money in 1999. I mean, it's a lot of money now in Mexico. And what happens is some of these cartels think, we got bounty hunters and stuff. Maybe we can go and threaten the mother, find out where he is, and collect some of this money. And so the mother And the sister, who lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, they get nervous that the cartel or some bounty hunter or someone is going to hurt them trying to find him to get the money. And that's when they decide finally, even though they've got plenty of evidence, in fact, they took his wife in and showed her all the crime scene photos, showed her the evidence of his fingerprints, showed her the evidence of the DNA, and the sister knows about all this information, but she only wants to cooperate with the authorities now that her ass is in the crosshairs. Now that she thinks her life is in danger because some other brown person might come after her to get the money. So that's the culture of this family. That's the culture of these people that we're importing, by the way. These are the good ones. The sister is one of the good ones, right? The mom and the wife, those are some of the good ones. The brother who's also helping him hide in Mexico, that's one of the good ones. So she contacts the FBI and arranges terms for him to turn himself in because he's now afraid for his life and they're all afraid for their lives, and because that's what it takes. Just like with securing the border, it didn't matter that you had all this evidence that he was a serial killer. It didn't matter that that was the right thing. It didn't matter that the FBI was looking for him. It didn't matter. And why would they be worried that the FBI was looking for him? For fuck's sake, they had him in custody and drove him home. Doing the right thing never seemed to occur to these people. It wasn't until the threat of violence that they decided to do the right thing. And unfortunately, that's the only language some people understand, including the people who violate our sovereignty and sneak across the border. That's the only language they understand. They're not going to stop sneaking in because you have more paperwork that you might have to fill out, or there's, you mean if I get caught, they're gonna drive me back home, or even maybe they'll put you in jail for a little bit and then drive you back home, like they did in the case of Resendiz here. He had to serve 12 months here and 12 months there, and then he got a ride home, and he kept coming back. And he wasn't even coming back to work, do one of these jobs that Americans won't do, like murder themselves. So finally the deal is struck where they promise that he'll be protected and that they won't go after the family. And he turns himself in to the Texas Rangers and the Texas FBI. And this is, let's see here, I guess June 30th or thereabouts, or no, early July. I think it was July 13th. And he is brought into Harris County Jail. But that's only half the battle. His trial, when it finally kicks in, he has changed his appearance. Even though it's only been a few months, he's managed to gain like 50 pounds in prison. He's grown his hair out long. He has much lighter skin now because instead of being out in the sun like a hobo, he's under prison lights all day long. This is something the FBI would always talk about, how much he would change his appearance anyway. His deliberate way of being misidentified or not matching up to descriptions. He pleads not guilty by way of insanity. The defense gets a Dr. Bruce Cohen. Yes. Dr. Bruce Cohen, who claims that he didn't know the difference between right and wrong. He was just crazy. He can't stand trial. And he certainly can't stand trial for a capital murder, which is what he was being tried with. They were going to try him for, because they had all the, the good thing about Texas, at least back then, is if you get a case like this, they'll basically put you in the speed checkout line to the executioner. And they're not going to sit there and try him for every single murder. They just have to get him on one. And then they can give him the death penalty, because Texas was a lot whiter back then. And so that was what they were doing. They were charging him with the murder of that mother of twins that was from Claudia Benton. They charged her with her murder because that's where they had the most evidence. They had the fingerprints. They had the DNA evidence. And then they had some of her stolen, or the items from her home were recovered from his wife because he had sent them to his wife. The prosecution, of course, said, well, that's insane. This turbo Jew that's saying that he doesn't know. I don't know any difference. I don't know that I'm doing wrong. Because if he didn't know that he was doing wrong, then why was he hiding the crimes? Why was he sneaking around? Obviously, he knows that he was doing something wrong. That whole defense, by the way, if you're so insane you are killing people, I don't want you. I don't want to have to pay for you to stay alive for the rest of your natural life. Why are we keeping so many fucking people alive that need to be gassed? Just being real here. If you're so insane that you're murdering people? What are you what do we need you for? Seriously, what do we need you for? Like, exactly what are we gaining by having you around? Do you know how much it costs to keep someone in jail for the rest of their natural life? Especially if they're one of these cases where apparently, oh, he's crazy, so you need to have extra care. And guess what? It's not unusual for a lot of these people to, oh, now he's not crazy anymore after like 5 or so years. You know, he's not crazy anymore. We can let him back out in the public. Why? Why don't we just have a giant incineration pit that we just drop them into? There's literally no reason to keep these people around. So anyway, thankfully, they have a prosecution has a secret weapon. They have the only survivor of one of his attacks. Holly Dunn is called to the stand, where she positively identifies him as her attacker, where she, in detail, explains to the jury how she and her boyfriend were attacked at the side of the railroad, how he tied them up, how he crushed her boyfriend's head with a rock, how he raped her at knife point while beating her in the head with the handle of the knife, and then fractured her skull with a 2x4. The jury deliberated for 7 hours and came back with a verdict of guilty. While Resendiz was on death row, he enjoyed the attention because he was on death row until 2006, despite being given a guilty verdict on May of 1999. We had to pay for this guy to stay alive for another 7 years. But again, we should have just had him a fire pit in the back of the courthouse that we just dropped him into. But while he was on death row, he sold his hair clippings to fans and charged for autographs and interviews with Mexican television. But finally, on July, what's the actual day here? I forget, that doesn't matter, who cares? In July of 2006, claiming that he was Jewish, not making this up, the Mexican serial killer who preferred his victims live in Weimar, claimed not only that he was Jewish, but that after he was killed, that he would enter a state of suspended animation for 3 days and then reappear in the Middle East to battle Israel's enemies. In fact, as they gave him the lethal injection, his final words were, "I want to ask if it is in your heart to forgive me. You don't have to. I know I allowed the devil to rule my life. I just ask you to forgive me and ask the Lord to forgive me for following the devil to deceive me. I thank God for having patience with me. I don't deserve to cause you any pain. You did not deserve this. I deserve what I'm getting." And then it says in the article, before drawing his final breath, the killer, who claims to be Jewish, prayed in Hebrew and Spanish. While on death row, he admitted to a lot of these other murders that were unsolved and was able to describe the crime scenes in ways that that weren't publicized. In fact, the reason why we know about the double murder of the teenagers, Jesse and let's see here, what was the other one? Jesse Howell and Wendy von Heuben, is Wendy's body had never been found until he told the police where they could find her body. And I think it was recovered in 2001. All in all, they suspect he could have been responsible for up to 200 murders because he had been murdering people since the mid-'80s on a fairly regular basis. He told his court-appointed psychologist that he lost track of how many people he killed, and he didn't know the chronological order in which he'd killed them. And of course, many authorities after the trial, even the stupid Mexican authorities in Juarez, started to wonder if maybe he was responsible for a lot of the dead bodies found by the railroad tracks that they had previously just chalked up to normal Mexican violence, normal cartel violence. So all in all, he could have been killed. He could have killed 200 fucking people. And this is again, one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, and most people have never heard of him. I know I'd never heard of him. I'd never heard of him. In fact, it's like I said, it's hard to do research on the guy because he goes by so many different names. Maybe that's part of it, even though they've all kind of settled on Angel Mutarino Resendiz. But you never hear about Resendiz, the illegal immigrant mass murdering serial killer. You always hear about how serial killers are white guys. Oh, it's white incels doing all the serial killing. Really, is it? Anyway, not a super long one tonight. That's, like I said, it was hard to just get all the facts of this case because you watch these documentaries. First of all, a lot of them don't cover all the deaths. In fact, even his Wikipedia doesn't cover all of the murders that he did. But it links to court documents that do, which I found curious. Like you look at his Wikipedia article and they leave out like 5 of the victims. But then you go to the court documents where he's confessing to these murders and it's like, I found these court documents because you're linking them in the article that you're saying that you're leaving this out of. So, in fact, the two teenagers, there's even like a whole documentary that's just about those.
My name is Marcel Dinkong, and I did my master's in nursing online. I decided after a year of being on the floor, I will pursue my master's. And I loved how integrated it all was, how invested the teachers and the clinicians and even the other students were in each other succeeding.
Two, about how they went missing and how they didn't know what happened to him until 2001 when he's on death row and he shows them where the body was. They're not listed in his Wikipedia page. And there's been documentaries done about it. Almost as if they're trying to make it sound like he's not that, much of a killer. And as I mentioned, in all the documentaries I watched, like I said, about 5 of them, they never mention the fuck up with the FBI and the INS. They don't mention that he was arrested so many fucking times, and that these arrests and these deportations, it wasn't just that one fuck up that we have in 1999, right at the peak of the manhunt. That this was happening in between all the murders. So it wasn't like a new thing. It's just that it was a new thing that people were actually looking around at this. But his entire murder career, he was getting arrested, put in jail for 12 months, driven back to Mexico, coming back literally a month later to kill again. Then he'd float around in the country for a few more months, got arrested for something else, maybe spent a couple months in jail, ride back to Mexico, and he'd be back a few months later to go kill again. That was every time, every fucking single time. They also don't mention there's one documentary that really talks shit about his the defense psychiatrist, but they don't mention that his name was Bruce Cohen. I'm telling you, this is it's history is written by the winners, I guess is the way to put it. That's the easiest way to explain it. And we're not winning right now. Anyway,